Mm-hmm.
It's a really good thumbnail.
Nice juxtaposition.
It is a nice juxtaposition. Props to Gene.
Yeah.
Give it up to Gene Bajlan, the thumbnail king.
It's blossoming nicely. I like telling dudes that. You're blossoming nicely, sir.
What is their usual response when you say that?
It's usually really quiet, staring at the ground, little feet shuffling.
That is a win for MT.
Yep.
Good morning to most, good afternoon to others, and good evening to the viewing audience across the pond. I'm Jason Miles, your host for another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. If you're new to the channel, please like, subscribe. If you're enjoying what you see, make sure you hit that notification bell so you are alerted whenever we go live, as we're constantly adding cross streams and new shows. If you haven't checked it out, Pascal Robert and Jeff Kennedy took on the history of Black fraternal organizations for the recent Mau Mau Hour, and it was a very informative and spicy show. If you'd like to be a part of the live audience for shows like the Mau Mau Hour, join us for movie nights, or have access to champagne rooms, past and present, there's only one way. Become a patron for as little as $3 a month or $30 for the year. It can all be yours. Speaking of TIR, let me bring in the faceless voice of reason, super producer, chat moderator extraordinaire, and also fan of 90s hip hop, M. Toussaint.
Hello, hello. Really looking forward to this today.
And this show also is something special for my co-host, my homie, my dog, aficionado of not just body jacking, but also this golden era of hip hop, the Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Not here yet. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles, M. Toussaint.
For those watching the show live, this is a pre-record we did the day before because we could not get our guest on a Saturday to do this for the live stream. For patrons, we have released this live, so there might be a few people joining in, as it will be a smaller audience. But let's bring in our guest because I want to get right down to the conversation. Recently, we've had another rapper from the golden era of hip hop pass away. Dave from De La Soul succumbed to a long, hard-fought battle with congestive heart problems. De La Soul, along with Tribe Called Quest and Jungle Brothers, helped pave the way for a more inventive and creative hip hop that wasn't bogged down by inner city urban tropes. De La Soul, marketed as hip hop hippies, helped open up the market for hip hop to new suburban audiences. Their use of samples beyond James Brown and funk took the genre into new, exciting directions. To help us talk more about this is composer and best-selling author, also fan of 90s hip-hop, Daniel Maté.
Hello.
Daniel, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you for having me. Thanks, Jason. Great to be here.
This hits a lot of us hard because, it's a reminder that we're getting old.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be real about that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is too soon to see a lot of these guys go. DMX went about 55, 56. Black Rob passed away. Sadly, Shock G passed away. When I was in my I guess I was in my teens to my early 20s, Tupac and Biggie both die violently. And I think we all think that's the way that hip hoppers go, is going to be violent deaths.
And young.
And young, right? They're going to live fast and leave this beautiful corpse. We're not seeing this with these golden age rappers post Biggie and Pac, are we?
No, we're seeing them die of chronic health conditions in many cases. Some of which don't get super specified in the aftermath. Like, the speculation, I think, is that it was his congestive heart problems, but I don't know that the cause of death has been, but it stands to reason. And MF Doom, I'm not clear on what killed him, but it was some kind of, illness, and that was a hard one. He's from the golden era under a different name, right? Zev Love X.
Zev Love X from KMD.
From KMD. The gas face. And I guess this kind of could be said to interface with the book that I co-wrote with my dad, which is called The Myth of Normal, Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture. And I can't say what each of these guys had lived through or what they were dealing with, but we do see in the book that chronic health problems on the rise, and it's stress related, and not just current like job stress or relationship stress, but the accumulated stress of the allostatic load, as the researchers call it, which is to say the wear and tear on the body of trying to maintain equilibrium among the life is hectic, to quote Inspector Deck, reality of our world. And of course, those realities and those stresses are not distributed equally across the population, which is why we have a chapter on how race and class get under the skin, how sex gets under the skin, why women seem to be skyrocketing in chronic health issues as opposed to men disproportionately. So again, without being reductive or playing armchair diagnostician on human beings, so I didn't know personally, we are certainly seeing, we know that health problems among Black men, Black women, there are just statistics that are just outrageous. And they're completely inexplicable by the genetic explanation makes no sense because these same conditions don't appear among, these people's genetic relatives on a different continent in Africa, and they're increasing over time. Genes don't change that much. So that's what I see when I see it. But whatever it is, you're right. They're not, it's not Danny Brown, die like a rock star. It's die like a middle-aged person with real people problems.
You die like a middle-aged person with no health care. I mean, I did get to know some of these people personally. I got to know Gift of Gab. And the last time I saw him before he passed, I remember he had someone like help him walk. And the tour manager was telling me, because where I lived, a lot of these bands or these artists would rehearse and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, he's losing his sight due to diabetes." And of course, he later succumbed. And Biz,
you're in Oakland.
Well, now I'm in Mexico, but before I was in Oakland. Yeah.
So Pam the Funktress too, from the Coup.
Pam passed away, and that's a whole sad story as well.
Yeah.
The last time I saw Biz, he had just got a stevia soda named after him. I ran into him at a health food conference, actually, where he had this sugar-free soda because he had, lost weight again. His weight definitely fluctuated. So it is interesting to see some of the health problems these guys have. Also, I think people don't realize the first couple waves of hip hop didn't make that much money.
No.
Only the guys that got into film really made money. Like look at LL. You know, who else got into film early on?
Ice-T.
Ice-T, Ice Cube.
Ice Cube, yeah.
You know,
Never imagined Ice Cube would be getting into like lighthearted family road trip comedies. But there you go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Pascal, how do you feel about this? Because again, these guys are your age.
It's I mean, talk about a cause for reflection or self-reflection is that watching people who are literally your peers, you know, David Jolicoeur, who, you know, for many people who do not know, was Haitian American. You know, he was a brother from Long Island whose parents were immigrants from Haiti in the same era that my parents left Haiti in the late 60s, early 70s. He went to SUNY Westbury. Him and I are contemporaries. We're the same age. And he literally used to come to frat parties we used to throw at Hofstra on Long Island. I know people who went to SUNY Westbury with him and Plug One. And when I found out he died, I was devastated because this is a guy. I mean, I didn't know him personally well, but I know people who knew him. I'd see him at our parties all the time. Busta Rhymes used to come to parties at Hofstra, as a matter of fact, because Hofstra was a very big party scene on Long Island. And it was really devastating to me in terms of thinking about him, DMX, and you know, Biz Markie, you know, MF Doom, all of these guys, Shock G, who were in a period of time when I was in college, some when I was in the 90s when I was in law school, and I was, you know, still very much into the music, and now seeing them being my peers in age, being taken by various types of, you know, natural or unnatural death is really kind of it makes you really reflect and think about your own mortality in many, many ways. And what's sad about this to me is that, of course, there's a racial component in terms of, you know, you seeing black men in one industry, in one genre of music die, you know, over and over and over again. But at the same time, it makes you wonder, like, what was the quality of life these men were leading after the peak of their success? And like, did they have health care? Did they have, you know, were they seeing their doctors? Like, what, you know, were they just a product of accumulating all of the touring lifestyle bad habits that Jason knows so well, that we've talked about on this show, that they couldn't purge in their adult years, that they may have still had attachments to? And it's really sad to see how all of this ends up just with these very talented young artists dying so young. And it's very, very sad, man. It's very sad. Particularly,
go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Particularly when you think about the social and the cultural impact of De La Soul as being a transformative aspect of golden era, late 80s hip hop. And I know we're going to get into that very much so. But one of the things that bothers me the most is that I don't think the contemporary generation of kids who listen to hip hop understand how much De La Soul were trailblazers in terms of what they were able to do to change the genre when, you know, the NWA had already entered the cipher with Straight Outta Compton, and when there was still a schism between the kind of BDP kind of conscious rap, Boogie Down Productions, KRS-One, and the braggadocio of Run DMC, LL Cool J. So you kind of had, you know, Def Jam, and you had some conscious rap. You had the rise of, you know, Public Enemy. You had Afrocentric kind of bass rap. And the way in which De La Soul didn't overpower you with the racial consciousness in the way that made it a trope, like some other groups that maybe have come later, but at the same time maintained consciousness and had a political message, but didn't bang you over the head like Public Enemy either, but still made it enjoyable, fun, but you got to understand the seriousness of what they were saying. To me, was this the perfect threading of the needle of what some people would call quote unquote conscious hip hop. I don't like that term. That was not really just a trope or corny or over the top. I think of their songs like Stakes is High.
Yeah.
I think of their first album. You look at the interviews right when they have their initial album and they're sitting in front of their house in Amityville. They're basically making it clear, like, listen, we grew up in the suburbs in these like 1,500 square foot houses. We have grass. We don't look at the world the same way as people who grew up in the South Bronx. And we don't have a problem with that.
And yet they were able to look, because Paz was born in the Bronx, right? I think Paz, his family moved, settled on the shores of the Long Isle, as he says in Break of Dawn, right? And they were able to look at what their family, friends, people were going through a lens from the outside. So you have songs like Ghetto Thang on 3 Feet High and Rising. Mary Had a Little Lamb, that's a fib. She had 2 kids though, and 1 crib, or 3 kids and 1, speaking from the outside with a kind of cool objectivity and a sadness and a wistfulness and a slight critique maybe, or a sort of, but certainly a critique of the stereotypes, and a critique, sort of a social critique of like, and just looking at it from a middle class perspective, a sympathetic one, right? But then, in a song like My Brother's a Basshead, other rappers, their brother being a basshead would not be such a, what can I say? Unfortunately, it would be more expected. But the conceit of that song is, here I am, straight and narrow. My mother goes to church, and my brother is the one in our family who's succumbing to that. And it just has a very different vibe coming from these guys. And just one last thing in terms of the tragedy of Dave's passing. One thing we haven't said, and it's just the elephant in the room, is the timing. Because 2 weeks from now, you talk about how they don't get their shine, and he maybe didn't make much money. Well, there was a huge added impediment for this particular group, which was this bullshit with the sample clearances, which means that their classic albums, I'd say all 4 of their first albums are 4 of the best albums in hip hop history. And you cannot say that about any other group or rapper, that their first 4 albums, each one of them, in my opinion, is a 5 mic classic. And then, AOI, the next couple albums also had some amazing stuff on it. Those albums are not available on streaming platforms, and they're about to be finally, and Dave dies on Super Bowl Sunday. To me, that's just what got me in the ribs. I really wanted him to see this. And another thing, remember De La or Paz in that MF Doom joint, Rock Cocaine Flow says, we're De La till the death, or at least until we break up.
Yeah.
Well, we all knew that the second one was never going to happen, and it didn't. Unlike every single other group, these guys stayed together.
That means a lot, because you've been through some major ups and major downs. There's also, I do want to get into De La Soul. Actually, let's pivot to that. I kind of want to get into that initial De La Soul album of 3 Feet High and Rising, which comes out about 1989.
Yeah.
And there's a great ad that people were posting, and our friend of show, a friend in real life, Justin Hunt, has started his De La tribute off with this ad, and it's a white man in a suit, and the ad says, "I came in for you too. I came out with De La Soul," and the De La Soul is being marketed as the new Beatles. And there's 2 artists to me, De La Soul and Lenny Kravitz, that were being marketed around the same time as a revival of 60s creativity, because you have all these boomers who are a lot younger 40 years ago as young record executives that are pitching the legitimacy of these black artists to not just a black audience. And De La Soul, in my opinion, more so than the taboo nature of going to listen to NWA and even Run DMC, where they're going to give you the stereotypical tropes, right? as our friend Teray says, he felt like when he saw NWA, he thought it was fresh out of D.W. Griffith. And I don't know if I agree wholeheartedly with that, but I understand the sentiment. But De La Soul is just so different from the visual aesthetic, and the way the samples are layered, what they're choosing for samples. You know, at this point, it's just break beats, very, you know, diaphragmic yelling on records, and these guys are laid back on the beat. You're
Steely
taking
Dan, Hall and
samples.
Oates.
Yeah. And it's such a sonic detour, in my opinion, for hip hop, that even when you think of the rapper, if you were to say rap in 1989, you would think all black, gold chain, I'm the ABC. And these guys come without the ABC flow, and it just, to what everyone is saying, it mirrors that reality of, I don't understand the urgency that you are saying these words in, because I don't have broken glass everywhere. I'd love to get your guys' opinion on that.
Well, in terms of the flow, there's something almost Dr. Seuss-like about the way they rapped, especially on the first couple of albums. Every song, if you notice, every song has its own rhyme scheme. It's not like they're just spitting bars and like filling 16 bars whatever way. You know, first song, Magic Number, da 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 da, rhyme. You know, that's the word. And then on line 4, it rhymes with that. Difficult preaching is positive pleasure, pleasure. You know, pleasure in the music, something something something. Me, myself, and I. Mirror, mirror on the wall, tell me, mirror, what is wrong? It's almost a nursery rhyme. And then they got more complicated on De La Soul is Dead, but it stayed, you know, like think of Millie pulled a pistol on Santa. You know, here's a story about the trifling times of Millie. Da 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 da. And they both stick to it. They each stick to the same rhyme scheme, which creates a very different effect than, say, Q-Tip and Fife passing it off, and you get to hear their individual styles, because the rhyme schemes, the setups are consistent. You hear the differences in their personality in a more subtle way. Then they get to Balloon Mind State. I know I'm jumping ahead to 1993, and it gets a lot more bebop, a lot more free form, and they're both, it's so free associative, and that's my favorite De La album. But yeah, they were whimsical, they were buoyant, they were bohemian. They never liked the hippies thing. You know, Arsenio dissed us, but the crowd kept clapping. I think that's what they were referring to. Like, you know, they felt pigeonholed, and which is why whenever they performed Me, Myself, and I for the rest of their career, they would introduce it as "We Hate This Song," kind of tongue in cheek. But they were, you know, as the intro to Plug Tunin says, get ready to flaunt that new style of speak. And it really was a new style of speak, which conveyed so many emotions and attitudes and and a sense of humor that was just not present in hip hop. You know, it had more in common with like the Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique in some ways than it did with KRS-One. But it was still aware of hip hop, you know, and it would comment on hip hop culture and sometimes make fun of it and sometimes quote it. And what was great is that later in their career, Ghostface guesting on their stuff, and they're doing a song with Snoop Dogg, and you know, they found their way to harmonize with the other streams of hip hop. Everything was confluent, everything merged into a river where everyone could coexist.
I think that also speaks to hip hop being, for those guys, rap was just rap. Like, again, right. Touring with Biz, when he shows you pictures of his early tour days, the best one I saw was, it was him, Will Smith, and Eazy-E. And I said, "What is this?" He goes, "It was tour." And he looked at me like, "What do you mean? Why do you seem baffled by this? This is just what it was." Pascal, again, this is your era of hip hop where rap is just rap. Fresh Prince is really no different than NWA. How do you feel about that first De La record as well, as someone that didn't grow up in the projects?
I mean, it was really shocking to me. The first time I actually heard 3 Feet High and Rising was actually when I saw the video for Me, Myself, and I, and I was like, "Whoa, this is really interesting." I was like, because they're in the high
Classroom.
school
Yeah.
in the classroom, right?
Mhm.
And and he's like, "Yo, Pops, what did you get, man?" He's like, "I got Deaf Beat, man." And it's like, and it's the whole skit about this teacher, Deaf. I mean, it's really creative. I mean, obviously we can't ascribe them to choreographing the video, but if you look at the theme of that video, they're basically 3 kids in high school going to a classroom, and they're obviously like new rappers, and the teacher is this guy Deafbeat, who is like this trope of like an old school rapper who's got a gold chain on in the b-boy pose, you know what I'm saying, who is like the teacher of the class. And if you really think about what the subversive message of the video is that they're basically like, "Oh my God, we got to see this clown again, Deafbeat." But the thing is, what's subversive about the video is that the majority of rappers at that time was still Deafbeat. They still were, the b-boy pose, the gold chains, and that posturing of what was considered classic hip hop still carries on into the 90s, where you have the rise of gangster rap, coke rap, and all of that stuff, where it becomes much more laced with stereotypes about urban life, drugs, gangs, and poverty. But at the same time, in that early album, 3 Feet High and Rising, you can tell just by not only the lyrics and the messaging, but even in the videos, that they're trying to say that we're not trying to diss the guys who came before, but we're taking a different path, a totally different path.
And in that video, what's also subversive is they're being bullied.
Yeah.
They're getting spitballs and paper airplanes thrown at them, And what's also hilarious is they take that for a while, and then they come back on the next album and they talk about, look, just because we speak peace doesn't mean we can't throw no joints, And they have the song Peace Porridge, which is like, okay, look, no, we will whoop that ass if you push us, but which also busts up stereotypes about what toughness looks like and what masculinity looks like. It's dignity. I'm going to stand up for myself. I'm going to stand up for my crew, but I'm going to do it with humor. You're not going to make me stoop to your level necessarily. I'm going to be me. And they really demonstrated the Me, Myself, and I ethos. It's not just one song or an anthem. It's the way they stuck to their unique personalities and let those personalities evolve at their own pace and stayed cohesive as a group is completely unmatched.
I want to say something that's really important that Daniel touched on. One of the most important contributions that I don't think De La Soul gets enough credit for is the ability that they had to demonstrate masculinity at a time when it was such a common trope that fell into underclass ideological stereotypes about what Black manhood was, where they intentionally didn't fall into those tropes and basically defined their masculinity as being good human beings. You know what I'm saying? They were really about their humanity, and their humanity is what enforced their masculinity, not about how many, B's and H's they could say in a song. And that's very important, man. And it's also very, very radical in terms of its being a departure from everything you saw before in terms of how Black men were depicted in hip hop to very much so what you saw afterwards.
Well, speaking of B's and H's, Toussaint.
Wow.
I know you have an opinion. How did De La Soul hit you as a young lady? You're a little younger than me. So when I would say probably either Stakes is High or De La Soul is Dead, you're probably being aware, or I could be wrong. You are from New York. You might have been in grade school bumping 3 feet high. How did it hit you as a black woman?
Well, I had an older sister who was also around older people. So I was bumping it from the start pretty much. I'm from the Jamaica Queens area, and it's like we're all part of the identity together. I probably wasn't going to get too far as a kid without listening to it anyway. If I
Really?
didn't have older siblings. Yeah, cuz it's just kind of it represents how we all were. Like De La Soul was from Long Island, which I lived very close to Long Island, but it was still Queens. So I would say maybe Tribe Called Quest more so represented where we were from, but it all went together. These are all the same people.
Yeah.
Immigrant families, first generation kids, all kind of doing the same thing. I will say that I really appreciated the mature representation of rap that they gave. Completely three dimensional. It wasn't, I wouldn't say it was about being good people, it was about being three dimensional. They brought complexity into everything they did. And they didn't make it easy for you. They're just like, this is who we are. And we're not interested in collapsing that to fit into anything else. We're gonna make our own lane.
And the crew aspect of what they did with native tongues, I think we have to also bring that up, because we first get our taste of native tongues and what a posse cut could be on that first album with Buddy,
Yeah.
where you have all these
Buddy.
people that you might have seen before, maybe don't know that well, Tribe, and that continues a relationship. And I grew up in Oakland, and Hieroglyphics was a crew that was very prominent in my hip hop understanding, as I even went to school. Some of those guys went to the same school as me. Pascal probably make fun of that about the high school.
No, it's really, let me tell you, it's really. I'm not surprised that you pivoted to native tongues,
Mhm.
because so much of that aesthetic I can see easily manifesting in the Bay area.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Hyro is, you can't have hieroglyphics
There's no
without
one without the other.
without
Native
native
tongues.
tongues. And it's
Yeah.
it's just what they did on those songs is even what I try to do with this show. I don't know if maybe I shouldn't be saying this out loud. I don't care. I love the posse atmosphere of, like, there's this crew of dope MCs that don't have to outshine each other. Dave can just do the hook on a war tour.
Right.
And that comes
Mhm.
from sometimes just being in the same studio, right? Oh, you guys are in room X. Okay, let's go in there and
And this is
and
before
do
He
a
was
hook.
just in the
Wu
studio.
Tang.
Yo,
Right.
yeah.
Yes.
Who passed who took the torch. And you look at the Buddy video. Also, speaking of black women and black men, look at that video. What is that video? It's a bunch of friends standing around, laughing with each other, partying, having this warm, energetic vibe. They're all wearing whatever the F they want to wear. The women,
Exactly.
are just dressed to express themselves, and so are the men. You want to talk about gender nonconformity? Like,
Yeah.
this is a crew, not in the sense of like individual identity and like which sex do I identify with, but in terms of gender performance, these people were just simply not interested in being told what to do. It's democratic. I can do whatever I want, right? That was their anthem. That was their ethos, and they just demonstrated it. And they came up with their own language for it. But yeah, I mean, and even De La's like sex raps. You look at, like, I think.
Yes.
Do you mind if I talk about a song from Stakes is High, or is that jumping
Yeah,
ahead
yeah,
too
yeah,
far?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
All right,
yeah.
so look at the song "Better Listen"
Mhm.
from Stakes is High. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's two verses, Dave and Paz. They're both set up the same way. They're hanging out, being like, "Hey, what's going on? Oh, not much, chilling. What have you been up to?" Well, listen. And they each tell a story. Now, what's Dave's story? Dave's story is about failing miserably, striking the fuck out with a woman. Like, it doesn't go well. You
Mhm.
know, you know, I'm not Salt and Pepper who like pushing it to sisters, you know, you need to get walking with it, mister. You better listen. So better listen is coming from her. She ends up winning. And he's just like, well, that's just how it goes. He asks Poss, what's going on with you? Well, same type situation. And then his verse is about kind of a conquest at a cookout, you know? It was an outside jam one Saturday night when this pretty ass girl got locked in my sight. She was a ghetto philosopher, you know the type, thinking Mary J. and Johnny understood her strife. And they end up having this conversation. He depicts this conversation that's very flirty, but also kind of edgy. She's not taking any bullshit. And he even gives her, and he doesn't, it's not like Positive K's song, I Got a Man, where like, you know, we hear the woman's voice. He just does her voice. And he says, she says, let me apologize for sounding so sassy, but brothers act as if my ass has a sign that says harass me. And she talks about her ex who painted bruises on my ass. I ain't seen him ever since. Then he like comes back at her. He says, listen, dear, or rabbit, or whoever the hell you be. I'm not the one to embarrass, but the one to MC. And she's taken by that. Wow. Then he says, well, the flag was lowered, so my wood was raised. And now we have the little consummation at the end of it. But it's earned through conversation, through flirtation, through courtship, through a dance that's equal between them. And it's kind of like, it's very alive, it's very rich, it's very human. It's not this scripted, pornified domination and dehumanization of somebody, which, not to like judge the rappers who, it's not my place to like pass judgment on anybody, but it was a refreshing change of pace in 1996.
Absolutely. And I would say back to Buddy for a moment. It's a courtship song. It's a flirty song. I understood that as a kid. I didn't understand everything that was happening, but I understood that part. But you look at the video, it is men and women, and the women are dressed however they want to be dressed. People are dancing. There's children in the video. I went to school with one of the children that was in the video. His name was Jeffrey. Hi, Jeffrey. I used to go to school with Jeffrey and his brother. That's how
Jeff,
like
the main character from De La Soul is Dead. Jeff, the one who keeps getting picked on by Hemorrhoid, the leader. You know what I'm talking about? Jeff with the tape and the skits. No, it couldn't be.
I doubt it. I doubt it. Jeff was little.
There was a little skits. Is it you don't know if that's him? You should ask him if he's
I don't
a little.
remember. I should.
It was by a kid, actually.
I'll check that out.
It's voice. I was just, so you can't get, as Daniel said earlier, you cannot get De La Soul music on the streaming services. You can sometimes find it on YouTube if you don't own them. And that also
down on
speaks
YouTube,
to,
actually.
I just was listening. Someone put it back up.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of those things you have to keep putting up.
It goes up, it goes down, right? And this person time coded all the songs as well. I'll send it to you, Daniel.
Thanks.
It's a sad state of affairs in my opinion, because we've had this conversation on the show before, and this isn't to say that one era is greater than the other, blah blah blah, but there is something to be said about owning music, owning media, coveting these things that you own. And I don't own any more CDs, and sadly I don't have 3 Feet High. I don't think I've ever owned an actual 3 Feet High. I think I always had a tape copy of a friend who had all the CDs, as many of us probably had that one friend that bought everything. And re-listening to that album before you came on, that for me was my favorite De La Soul album, I think, because it was so dark. Even the videos for that record are dark. Now, after the success of 3 Feet High and Rising, and they're part of the Daisy Age, which I really want to know if that's something that they came up with or if that was a marketing pitch, because also the imagery of that first record is very New York pop art at the time, very Keith Haring.
Yes.
Tribe has a little, kind of that whole crew has a little bit of that, and you always wonder like how much of that was you guys' influence, how much of that is the influence of record labels trying to get you over to a different audience. And they definitely kill that with De La Soul is Dead, which is about them killing the quote unquote Daisy Age, or the inner soul y'all age. of their music. Sonically, to me, it's not that much of a departure because you're still getting layering of sample.
No.
You're still getting, you know, a little bit of jazz with pop music and funk, but not as much funk. And but the subject matter to me is a little darker. The main single isn't full of major chords like Me, Myself, and I, you know, ha ha ha, ring ring, hey, or hey hey, whatever.
It's about dismissing people who are trying to give them their demos. It's about leaving a fake answering machine message. Hey, how you doing?
Right.
Sorry you can't get through. Why don't you leave your name and your number? It's like it's like a leave us the fuck alone. I mean, there was also the Saturdays roller skating song, which was
Saturdays, and there's a few songs on that record that, you know, definitely have that feel of the first one, but the ring 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 single and the video, the accompanying video, for me, it was just like, I still love that aesthetic. I don't know how you feel about that, Pascal.
No, I mean, it was something that was very common amongst the period of my youth, right? Because one of the things that I remember vividly is that there's this return to what's called, quote unquote, consciousness. And we know that term has so politically charged in terms of what it means and what it doesn't. But the thing that's really fascinating in that era, and I'm from that generation, is that, you know, you have, you know, brothers wearing the Africa medallions, you know, the whole, you know, the role in which what is considered to be Black identity in New York in the late and early 90s is shaped by, you know, the political context of race in a post-Black Power era in a city that you still have TV shows like It Is, and that were hotbeds of like Black nationalism and Black cultural nationalism and traditional Black nationalism. But as much as you still see those kind of slight you know, acknowledgments of that cultural kind of vibe, it doesn't hit you over the head. It's not the main theme of the music. It's not the main theme of the overall group. And what's valuable to me about De La Soul, and particularly with Native Tongues, because clearly with Native Tongues, you have, you know, the Jungle Brothers were clearly much more culturally nationalist in terms of the way they carried themselves. But at the same time is that they were able to mesh and flow without anyone saying that, quote unquote, I'm the right kind of brother or sister, or, you know, it's like, oh, you're not deep enough, brother. I mean, like the very cornball attempts of racial essentialism that we saw in the late 60s, early 70s during Black Power that become more popular in the contemporary age of YouTube hotepism, where, you know, if you're not watching XYZ's videos or supporting XYZ scholar, you know, saying you must be one of those Uncle Toms or whatever else. So I appreciated that they didn't have to worry about racial authenticity, but at the same time existed in a space where they were enjoying the cultural milieu that was existing at the time. And I remember those times. And they were very much a part of giving me the intellectual kind of foundation to investigate like race, culture, and politics, and a variety of issues that I bring to this show comes out of that period of time.
I also want to ask you this, Daniel, as a music composer. Yeah. For me, De La Soul was my gateway into house music. And Pascal is a bigger fan of house music than me, but I'm a much bigger fan of trip hop than he is. So the Portisheads and Massive Attacks and all that stuff. But there's a direct through line, in my opinion, from the Native Tongues to the Bristol sound, which becomes trip hop.
Well, what's really hilarious to me about that, I never would have thought of that, but it's obviously true. And, you know, Q-Tip guested on D-Light, Groove is in the Heart.
Yes.
And then later you have, you know, De La on the Propeller Heads, which is that's a descendant, I think, of
Yeah.
of that era, right? Brits doing things with sample heavy breakbeats and things like that. That might have even been like De La's biggest pop hit, ultimately, being on that. Oh, sorry, not Propellerheads,
Gorillaz.
Gorillaz, yeah. But what's hilarious that De La was your pipeline, your gateway to house music. The only connection I could think of is the song "Kicked Out the House," where they're making fun of house music, and they started by saying, "In no way are we dissing any kind of house or club music. We're just glad we're not doing it. But if we did, this is how it would go." And then they do this 2.5 minutes of just ludicrous goofball shit. This is on De La Soul is Dead, Kick out the house. It sounds like the lyrics are "kicked out the house, hip house," which always sounded to me like we are the ones who've been kicked out of the hip hop house, which makes sense to me. But definitely expanding. I mean, look, De La Soul was my gateway into a number of things. Well, I have to be real about it. I'm a left-wing socialist Jewish kid from Western Canada. So the Beastie Boys were my gateway to everything. Right? But through the Beastie Boys, I heard Q-Tip on Get It Together from '94. I was at Jewish socialist summer camp every summer in British Columbia. Now, we'll put aside the fact that it was also a Zionist summer camp, because back then we thought you could be left-wing and Zionist. We were still trying to be labor Zionists. We were still laboring under the illusion that somehow these things were not directly contradictory. But we were trying to be the right kind of Zionist, two-state solution Zionists, anti-occupation Zionists, whatever. And we had all these cool-ass counselors coming from the East Coast, these like tie-dyed, really awesome, cats from Philly and Boston and New York. And I remember Sarah, who was this counselor I had a crush on, had the Balloon Mind State album, and Biz Markie is on that, and Drez from Black Sheep is on that, and Guru is on that from Gangstar, and then on
Jay
Stakes
Dilla.
Is High.
We learned who Jay Dilla is on that.
Stakes Is High, absolutely. Common and Most Def. Most Def. I first heard them on Stakes Is High, both absolutely just spectacular debut verses, yeah, I mean, De La was a pipeline to a lot of things. Now, can I ask you, I have a question about the native tongues that's I've never been able to figure out.
Okay.
So
who's in
native
it?
tongues are, what's that? Yeah, the native
Who's
tongues
in
are
it?
rolling, right, well, number one, right, is Brand Nubian a member, our Leaders of the New School, sort of, right? It's like who's a Woo affiliate and who's a core member of the crew. But so, the native tongues are rolling strong from 88, doing our own dang and Buddy and all that, through 91, Scenario, and the song that Tribe did with Nubian on that same album, and then Award Tour. Now we get to 1993. And on Balloon Mind State, Paz in particular has some very withering words about native tongues. He doesn't go into details, but he says in the woods, he says that native shit is dead, so the stick is coming. So like they're rebranding themselves, Yeah. He says, or some tongues who lied and said we'd be natives to the end. Nowadays we don't even speak, on the song I Am I Be, which is one of the most beautiful songs of all time by anyone. And what's interesting is that both Q-Tip and Busta Rhymes, you hear their voices on the intro, or at least in the little ad libs, I am Q-Tip, I be Friction. And Drez is on that album. So it's not like they broke up. But then on Stakes Is High, he says that's why the native tongues has been officially reinstated. So what happened?
I saw years. God, what year was this? This had to have been late 90s. De La Soul did a thing at the Upper Room in San Francisco, which sadly no longer exists, which was like an all ages club. And they were just speaking. They weren't playing. They were just speaking. And it was filled with people, that small little room. And someone asked about the native tongues. And I remember Pa saying that there were so many people in it at one point in time, they didn't know who was in the native tongues. Kid and Play, at one point, they were like, we don't really know them. So there was all these people that were in it. some people got bigger than others because people forget the females that are part of it. Moni Love, Queen Latifah becomes a massively big Hollywood star.
Right.
I don't even think when was the last time Queen Latifah even put out a record?
Yeah, she became more famous in Hollywood than she ever was as a rapper.
Massively. Right. And again, that goes back to my whole point. Whoever got into film, those are the cats that made money and kind of left their music, with the exception of LL Cool J. I really may not respect him that much politically, but I kind of dig what he does on this YouTube show with the salute the sample stuff. But I don't think they really knew who was all in it. I'm sure if you asked each of them, they'd probably give you a different answer. The core foundation seems to be the main groups that we all talk about: De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, and Jungle Brothers. But then you ask yourselves, what about Poor Righteous Teachers? Were they a part of it as well? Or
Nubian,
leaders of the new school. Speculation we could have. I mean, I don't know the actual obvious reason as to why, but maybe the cultural shift of the music in '93. Don't forget, this is when you're seeing you have Illmatic, you have Nas coming up, you got Wu-Tang coming around the corner, you got the rise of Bad Boy. Is with Biggie Smalls' first album comes out, so there's a lot of pressure, right? And this is also within 2 years of the Chronic dropping on the West Coast, so there's a whole cultural shift going on. So there must be a lot of pressure
changes. I want Daniel. This is I want to get your opinion on this and pass. I'm gonna drop a bomb and I'm gonna walk away. I was on tour with a rock band, tour managing, and we're driving somewhere in the middle of America, and the singer goes, "Nirvana Nevermind changed everything for music." And me being difficult, yell out, "I disagree wholeheartedly. I don't think it changed anything. Not like the Chronic changed the landscape of music sonically, because it's mastered so much louder than everything else. And aesthetically, it is a lifestyle change from a gangster's life. There's not a lot of people getting murdered on the Chronic, but just the lifestyle of gangster life. It makes it a lifestyle brand that really allows itself to be sold in a way that the first NWA records really couldn't.
I think you're right about that. I wouldn't be so dismissive of the effect of Nevermind. Again, growing up in Vancouver, Canada, just up I-5 from Seattle, when I heard Nevermind, it changed my life. And around that time, I heard Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains. And what that did was it marked the end of the glam metal era. I mean, Guns N' Roses held on for a year or two after that, but it was a significant shift in the rock world, and around the same time, Metallica came out with their eponymous album, which really put an end to the fast thrash metal. So there were changes going on in rock music, and I think you could feel the impact of Nirvana across alternative rock, which then became corporate rock after Kurt put a bullet in his brain. So I wouldn't be so quick to pit the two against each other. But speaking about the Chronic on its own terms, yes, I was in Israel living on a kibbutz, another socialist, leftist, Zionist experiment with dubious results. When the Chronic came out, and I was on a Holocaust education tour in Poland when I first heard Nothing But a G Thing. And to be quite honest, guys, I've never listened to the Chronic all the way through. I can't. There's something about it that I find so unpleasant. It sounds amazing. And some of the songs I love, like Stranded on Death Row, that Posse Cup, Lady of Rage, and RBX and Dawes, just listening to these, and Snoop's voice, but what it is, it's an exaltation album. It's from the very first song, it's sneering, it's mean, it's also amazing, right? I don't love Dre as a rapper, so anytime he's rapping, I'm waiting for Snoop to come on. But the way they talk about women on that album was the first time there was a kind of nastiness to it that felt dangerously hostile. Well, I guess NWA did the same thing, but they were kind of like an alternative
Worse.
group. Well, they were a lot worse. It's true, but there was just something about the Chronic that I was intimidated by, I guess you could say. And sonically, it changed absolutely everything. I think Wu-Tang changed things too, but Wu-Tang expanded the palette for what creative, like weirdo hip hop could be, weirdo sampling. But Dre's mastering of the art of taking George Clinton and making it into G-Funk, it's unfathomable what that changed. But yeah, I've actually never fully managed to like listen to that entire album all the way through. Songs like Little Get a Boy, I love. Stranded on Death Row, others. Was never a huge fan of Nothing But a G Thing. It took me a while to get into West Coast rap around that time, but Tupac was sort of the way that I did, just because of his personal charisma and his vulnerability and his dramatist ability. But no argument for me there that the Chronic is crucial. But speaking of the West Coast, I would also say another group doesn't exist without native tongues is the Far Side.
Far Side. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that.
Mhm.
I was a huge fan of the Far Side when it first came out.
Yeah.
Also self-deprecating, much like De La Soul.
Passing Me By is the most it's the biggest incel anthem of all time.
We bump that stuff, to no end. And it's funny. For those that don't believe me, I don't know if it has the same effect if you're streaming, but if you had the Chronic tape, or CD, we had tapes, right? And you put that in the car, the volume had to go way down,
right?
Because this is when the mastering wars get in. That could be a whole other show, but it's just so crispy, and you hear every instrument. And that snare snaps so hard when you hear the Chronic. And this isn't to crap on the native tongues. It's just that for me, just judging it from a person that critiques eras, right? There's almost a death nail that you get with the sampling world, because also they're not dealing with the same lawsuits. Biz gets sued around De La Soul is Dead time that just destroys that album when he samples Just Spring Again. And you weren't just going to go in and layer sounds anymore, samples anymore. And when the Chronic comes out, granted, it's using a lot of this Parliament Funkadelic stuff, but this stuff's getting replayed. It just sonically, there's no pops, Some of those De La Soul samples, which again, these are songs I love. They are ingrained in my DNA. You can hear it sounds like bacon frying when the song starts because the records are so old. And maybe I didn't appreciate the artistry of finding these gems and hearing that bacon fried lets you know, like, hey, this is a real deal old first edition that you're hearing right here. Because again, 15, 16-year-old Jason is hearing Snoop Dogg, and it's like, whoa.
Yeah, De La does not bump in the whip in the same way. I mean, the Chronic set the standard. But I do feel like by the time we get to Balloon Mind State, that's a clean album. That's a beautiful. That's jazz. There's flutes on it. There's Maceo Parker. It's got really tasty it's almost like some of the beats are almost played with brushes. You can hear also you don't get Diggable Planets with that, then, by the way, not for nothing. And Blowout Comb is one of the greatest albums of all time.
Great album. I do like the second one a little bit more.
By far, it's much deeper. It's more subversively radical. They're shouting out, Chairman Mao and
the syncopation of the drums.
It's incredible. And the three, and you have to listen because their vocals are mixed kind of just under the surface of the water, so you have to really dig in. By the time you get to Stakes Is High, they were going back to a more spare boom bap kind of aesthetic. Like I just remember them when I first heard The Business with Common. How does it start? It starts with I think it's Pasta's voice, or maybe saying, and bass up the track a little bit because I really want to hear that.
It's
You know,
the,
you know what I'm saying?
sample from Craig Mack.
Oh wow, that's right. And then it
That's the
comes
Craig
in.
Mack
Mhm.
sample.
Dun,
Yeah.
dun. And it's so. I think that album is great for the car, but no, there's no. It's a different. It's a whole different world.
Well, let me ask you two OGs this question. I'm gonna ask all three of you OGs this question. So again, I'll reference Justin Hunt brought this up. Hopefully, MT will drop some links to Justin Hunt's work in the comments for the show. But he had an episode where he talks to Ninth Wonder, and Ninth Wonder says 1996 is a very important year because Stakes is High comes out around the same time as Nas is written, and Nas's second record is a sonic departure from the first one. Premiere is disappeared. All these old classic jazz samples are gone, and there's like Trackmasters beats. And again, back to this crispy production we're talking about. Put in Illmatic, put in It Was Written. Totally different sounding records from that opening Sting sample that he has on the first song Nas has.
Oh right, yeah, Shape of My Heart.
But what Ninth Wonder says is this departure for Nas is a departure for a lot of hip hop fans because now there becomes two camps in rap.
Yes.
The boom bap guys and this more poppy sounding, radio friendly sounding. And also at the same time, you have the Communications Act, which allows corporations to own several media companies. So as these corporations are owning several media companies at the same time, music does change as far as what we hear ad nauseum. You guys were both alive at the same time. Pascal, you're a little older than us. So I want to know for you if this was even a bigger watershed moment, because is this a moment where you go, I'm not listening to this new stuff and I'm staying parked in my 90s bag?
I'm not gonna lie, because you got to remember my introduction to hip hop goes back to the late '70s, and I see all of this stuff coming in because my older cousin was a DJ. By '96, I'm kind of frustrated with the Bad Boy Records turn. To be frankly, I mean a lot of that jiggy stuff. I didn't like that stuff very much, man. I felt it was kind of over the top. I was just it was like glam hip hop to me. The whole all of the way that they were marketing, the whole kind of like jiggy lifestyle of that came with Biggie and Bad Boy. That kind of turned me off. I like Nas' second album very much, but also this is around the time where you have the East Coast West Coast beef. That's another factor that you see that going on. So at this period of time, I'm becoming very frustrated with every aspect of hip hop. What year is Biggie assassinated? Is that 96?
97.
97, yeah.
Yeah, Life After Death came out in '97.
So I'm seeing all of this kind of like shift in terms of the music. And I think that's the beginning of when I start to kind of pull back. It was like, yo, this is getting a little too much.
Yeah. Well, I think the observation that '96 is a watershed moment or a splitting of the fork in the road moment is really astute for a number of reasons. I mean, All Eyes on Me also comes out in that year. And All Eyes on Me marks a departure from Tupac's sort of more vulnerable side on Me Against the World to he just embraces the Suge Knight world. And it's very, that's right when it ends him as well. That whole world he gets consumed by it and taken down. And De La threw their gauntlet down. They said it, I mean, Paz had already said it, fuck being hard and it's complicated. But Dave is actually the one who has the entire verse on Stakes is High. I'm sick of bitches shaking asses. I'm sick of talking about blunts. I'm sick of Versace glasses. He's talking about the Jiggy era, and really Mace and Puffy were really more like 97, 98. But, Dave was laying it down, and a lot of people took offense. Like a lot of people were like, De La dissing us, which is very snowflakey, I think. You got to let De La be De La. But there is a splitting of the ways, because a couple of years later you have, I think that's the genesis of backpack rap. I think Stakes is High might be the first backpack rap album, because now Mos Def is on the scene. Now Common Sense is who he was at the time, and I prefer Common Sense to Common personally, as a name and as a performer. You have Lyricist Lounge coming soon. You have Company Flow coming soon. And there's no Company Flow without De La Soul. I feel like Paz de Neus is sort of in some ways a spiritual predecessor of LP, along with RZA. And sort of, and then, now you're into the raucous records and Def Jokes and all that, and you're off to the races, and that's just on a different planet. That's on a different asteroid than what was going on in mainstream hip hop. Meanwhile, on the other road, you've got 50 Cent coming, you've got the melding of rap and R&B with Nelly and whoever else, because I did stop listening around that time. I remember in the summer of '96, it actually felt like something was ending. And I remember that actually Beats, Rhymes, and Life, Tribe Called Quest's fourth album, came out right around the same time as Stakes is High. And I remember the two reviews of those two albums in Rolling Stone. Beats, Rhymes, Life was given 4 stars, I think, maybe 4.5. Stakes is High was given 2. And the reviewer said something like, rather than sticking to their bohemian roots, De La Soul decides to wax old school, and they called out, that one kind of dumb line from Super MCs where Paz says, projecting like you're hard, but in fact you're quite vaginal, and the rapper said, and the reviewer says, meanie, little buddy reference. But I was like, what are you talking about? This album is perfect. And meanwhile, Beats, Rhymes, and Life felt to me like the end of Tribe. I could just tell there was no cohesion between Tip and Fife. You could really feel it after Midnight Marauders. And the Far Side came out with Lab Cabin California, which felt unfocused. Had some great tracks, especially the Dilla tracks. But
they're not working with Jay Swift. No,
they're not working with Jay Swift, and they're not working together as well. It doesn't have that. Like, they're trying to adjust because they can't just be fun and frenetic and goofy anymore. Everyone's struggling to find a lane, and I felt like most groups, unlike De La, weren't able to stick that landing in that moment. And you could and Wu-Tang was doing more and more solo projects. I guess their solo projects stayed very solid through '96. Iron Man, although that was my least favorite of the first ones. But and then Forever comes out the next year, which has a lot of kind of cookie cutter Wu beats done by RZA's his subordinates. It's got some obviously it's got some great stuff, but you could take Wu-Tang Forever and slice it in a third and you'd have a classic album. So anyway, what am I saying? There were a lot of great ones losing focus, and I felt that way about It Was Written. I mean, a song like I Gave You Power stands the test of time. A lot of that other stuff, I don't know. Meanwhile, Outkast is coming up, and now there's the third power center. Now we have a tripolar power system in the geopolitics of hip hop. Because now the South has something to say, right?
The South has something very important to say. Pascal, do you want to add something real quick?
Yeah, no, let me tell you something. The album that I was banging hard from '96, '97 was Redman, Muddy Waters. That was my joint.
And there's another Tribe line. Redman's in the Scenario video.
That's true. Redman, and I was heavy. I was always a big Wu-Tang fan, but I was heavy into Wu-Tang. And where I might disagree with Daniel, only because of my experience when Wu-Tang Forever came out, I was like at the peak of hanging out with my buddies in law school, and that was just like, oh my God, cats were losing their mind.
Wow,
mind when Wu-Tang Forever came out. I bomb atomically, Socrates' philosophy.
Come on. I'm not talking about Triumph. I'm talking about like ODB.
Oh, Triumph.
Triumph. Yeah, but I'm talking about there was some filler on that album, like ODB's song "Dog Shit" and You God's like "Black Shampoo" or whatever. Like there was some stuff that was just like the good stuff was some of their best, and some of the beats it didn't have RZA's mad scientist vibe as much as the first one did. But how can it? It's 4 years later.
There's too much. There's too
There is
much
too much.
volume
It's an
coming out
embarrassment
of
of
that
riches.
camp. And if you think
Yes.
about hip hop and who can stand the test of time in hip hop, it's interesting because let's go in the Wayback Machine and remember what was happening to the people that came before De La Soul. That Native Tongues blow up caused a hippie happy rap scene to come. You have UMCs, KMD,
PM Dawn.
PM Dawn comes out of that scene. PM Dawn is a direct. If you want to know what it looks like when something hits and record labels go, "Yeah, you kid, you can do it too." PM Dawn looks like that. As much as I like, what they did later after their first record.
Die Without You still knocks.
I was gonna say Die Without You is a beautiful song. That might be the precursor to all these singy rap guys. But De La Soul and the success of the Native Tongues, and we have to put success in some kind of inverted quotes, does kind of destroy that first wave of hip hop. And it feels like the Chronic starts to be the thing that chips away at Native Tongues, because after that you have things like Daz Effects.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when I say the Wayback Machine, let's go back and remember what hip hop journalism looked like at the time and how these people were being reported. I was talking to Tucson about this. When Daz Effects came out with their album Straight from the Sewer, the thing about them was they were linguistics majors. I forget what school they went to in Virginia. It was the fact that they went to college that made them dope.
They went to Virginia Tiggity Tech.
Don't forget. Shout out to probably one of the greatest duos in hip hop who was correlated with DOS Effects, who's also correlated with Redman, EPMD.
EPMD.
EPMD is really, I mean, talk about underrated. Talk about underrated in terms
and
of
understated.
Late 80s hip hop.
Yeah.
Good branding.
Is they talk about people who don't get their flowers, man. These cats are responsible for so many great acts and so much great music that was in their crew. Now their crew didn't particularly have. I mean, what they call it, Def Squad? What was the name of the crew that was with?
Def
Squad.
Def Squad.
Ace and wasn't he part
Def
of that?
Squad was definitely
Redman, K-Solo,
Redman, Hurricane G, Keith Murray,
Craig
the
Madden.
Youngsters,
the Illy Funksters.
the Illy Funksters.
That was a little bit before. That was definitely before Native Tongues. I would make the argument that Def Squad is really the first time that posse thing comes out, and people are like, "Whoa, this is like."
No, you got your.
The symphony.
The symphony.
That's true, but that was not real. That was okay. The symphony was an album, a song. Okay, that was Mel. That
Marley,
was
Marley Marl. Yeah.
Marley Marl.
Craig G. Master Ace. Cool G Rap.
Big Daddy Kane.
Yeah.
One of my favorite hip hop cuts of all time. One of the greatest hip hop songs of all time. But it didn't really produce an ethos as a collective, like EPMD and that crew did, because you had a lot of albums, a lot of singles that came out with all those guys afterwards. The symphony, no question, is an incredible song, and the collaboration was memorable without a doubt. But Def Squad, man, was just
since we're on this tip, there's somebody we haven't brought up yet that I'm sure in the comments when this show goes live Saturday, we're going to get crapped on. Pete Rock.
Oh, Pete Rock
is another through line between all these groups, because remember Don't Curse, Heavy D, Q-Tip, CL Smooth, Cool G Rap, Heavy D also to me is somewhat adjacent to this sound.
Yeah.
It's true.
And without Pete Rock,
Also
there's
adjacent to
no
Bad Boy.
without Pete Rock, there's no Nas. I mean, Nas
It's
is
true.
sitting on Illmatic, about half,
Yeah.
a third of it is Pete Rock. And no, for sure. I mean, and there's a whole stream of rappers we haven't talked about, like Cool G Rap and even KRS, Boogie Down Productions. They're these sort of almost like free agents who are kind of roaming around, doing their thing,
Mhm.
representing their own skills and collaborating with just about everybody, but they weren't affiliated so much with a particular crew. And then there's Gangstar, right? Premier and
Ooh, we haven't even
Ooh.
mentioned Premier and Gangstar.
yeah. Well, Guru, we mentioned that Guru was on Patty Duke on Balloon Mind State, but yeah, no, Premier is again these individual craftsmen, these artisans who were each creating a sound that would be hugely influential. There's Large Professor, right? Main
Main
Source.
source. Main source. I was
Which
just
I
about to
recently
say that.
found out
Mhm.
they're half Canadian or 2/3 Canadian, like myself.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Get out of here.
yeah. Remember when Large Professor says "fuck them two DJs" in "Keeping It Rolling" by
Yeah.
West? He's talking about the Toronto contingent of.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, he used to go to Canada all the time. My friends, Living Legends, used to go to Vancouver all the time. So
Okay.
depending on where you were in Vancouver, you might have saw them in the.
I first saw Latyrix in Vancouver. I mean, Vancouver was a destination for all of the quantum MCs and all that for sure.
Yes. Very. Yes. We knew all those dudes, as well as my good friend who comes on this show. If you guys have watched the show, Coach Will, that was his first intern job in college when he went to Cal, was interning at Quantum, trying to write press releases with Jeff Chang and and getting to know those dudes. No, the 90s for me is probably this really magical era of hip hop. I'm sure there's some young people that think the 2010s are great, and that they should think that if that's the era you came up in. But just remembering what was all coming out. Like, what did you want to say, Tucson? I'm sorry.
Oh, I said no, they shouldn't. It wasn't
They
really
really
great.
shouldn't. They
No,
really
no,
shouldn't.
it's been evaluated many, many times. We have a golden era. We have one. Same with comic books. We know what it is. I just wanted to say about 1996. In the beginning of the golden era, we were all together, and it felt good. We were listening to the same things, but then we came to like a river and a bridge, and on the other side of the bridge were shiny suits and cocaine. And some of us,
Sadly,
some
the
of us-
cocaine was always there. You just didn't. They didn't rap
cocaine,
about it.
that's true, right? But more cocaine and out in the open. And some of us were going to cross that bridge because that music was pop and that music was accessible, like literally accessible. If you wanted to stay behind and stay in a native tongues kind of lane, that's underground. Now you have to look for it. Now you have to listen to college radio. Now you have to be up at 1 a.m. for Hot 97 to listen to Stretch and Bobbito. That's work. Now you have to work for it. And I think a lot of people in Pascal's age group were like, we're not working for it. We never had to work for it before. You go to the tree, to mix a metaphor. You pick the fruit, you eat it, right? It was never difficult for them. They didn't have to work. But then when you hit the shiny suit era, it goes pop and it's everywhere. It's easier to just give up and listen to Escobar, even though you know what Nas used to be. It's easier to listen to Mace, even though you don't like it. And then you're also kind of maligned if you're going to listen to what they call backpack rap. It's not as cool.
Now,
It's
I
not
like
as cool.
backpack rap. I like
Well,
that stuff because
Let's again. You have to remember these. Let's look at these seminal albums, 91 to 93. De La Soul is Dead. Low End Theory.
Come on.
93 Till Infinity.
it's a great album.
Right.
Bizarre
Dell's
Ride.
first record.
Bizarre Ride to the Far Side.
Yeah, Bizarre Ride to the Far Side. Inner City Griots by Freestyle Fellowship.
Mhm.
There's a lot of The Coup, Kill My Landlord. Saphir, Boxcar Sessions. There's a lot of interesting. The first Outkast record. Southern Playalistic is like 93, 94.
94.
There's a lot of interesting music
Yes.
that's coming out in this era, and a group that there was a group from Atlanta that actually predates Outkast, and I can't remember their name off the top of my
Goody
head.
Mob.
Goody Mob had some members in it, but they were called Y'all So Stupid. Came out around 92. That's, you might have to go into the hip hop encyclopedia to remember those dudes. They were on LaFace.
Granddad
Wow.
coming out with the gems.
And you know, there's a lot of kind of creative, cool shit coming out in this time frame. And the reason why I say the Chronic is so important, because just sonically all that stuff goes away. The colorful clothes goes away. Smiling in pictures goes away. You know, go into Pascal your photo albums before 1993 and tell me how you looked in your pictures and what was in your hands.
Probably a 40-ounce.
After 93, everybody's got a 40. Ain't nobody smiling.
I think that
Well,
smiling in
that was
public
just
is against the law. Love don't get you through life no more is one of the most incredible couplets in hip hop history, and that's Dave speaking on it in 1996.
That hit me really. I remember we were having a conversation about that in San Jose, California, when we went to go meet Peanut Butter Wolf, me and DJ Plattern, many moons ago, and talking about nobody smiles anymore. And we were looking through a friend's photo album, and we were noticing, we're like, damn, look at all these 1991 pictures. Everybody look happy to be there. And then after 91, it's just like, nah, man, everywhere's a ghetto. I don't care where you live, everywhere's a ghetto.
Goody Mob also said people don't dance no more.
That was a big thing I noticed too, because after the 90s, no one's dancing at all.
Remember when rappers had to dance?
I remember that.
Dancing.
Or at least have dancers. At least have, like the De La had dancers on the Arsenio Hall show.
Actual
I mean,
dancers.
Digital Underground gives you the Humpty Hump.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let's not forget Digital Underground's importance in this as well, because while De La is literally doing their own thing on the other side of the planet, Digital Underground is doing something extremely similar, where they're playing with funk music and jazz and not doing the okie doke as everybody else is doing. As Pascal explained, the deaf beat, they're doing their own thing, which is why I actually watched a really interesting conversation with De La Soul and Nori, and they were talking about a beef they had with Tupac. And I don't know if you know about this, Pascal.
I heard about that.
Apparently Tupac thought that the Ego Tripping video was a diss on Get Around.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't. They were friends. And Paz tells a story about being in San Francisco and a dude walking up on him, asking him why he dissed KRS-One. And Paz was like, I've never dissed KRS. He's like, KRS-One is a goat to me. Why would you say that? And he was like, well, you said this one line. That means you dissed KRS-One. And he said Tupac ran up, calmed the dude down, sent the dude away. And he said they were always friends. They were always cool. He said he tried to squash it. And sadly, he said Pac passed away before they could officially squash the sort of misunderstanding they had. But you know, those guys go back to when Tupac was dancing for Digital Underground. I
remember that. That song was huge when I was in college, man. The Humpty Dance.
Dance is your chance.
High school. We danced to that at the high school dance in, you know, wet ass Vancouver, Canada. In 90. It was on the radio, and you know, and it had all the steps, and it was, you know. But it was like naughtier. It was way naughtier than anything else. You know, getting busy in a Burger King bathroom. This is also the time.
Hell yeah!
But this is
Classic
also the my hump, and it's 69. My Humpty nose will tickle your rear. Like they didn't bleep that out. This is also the time when you start having like dance instructional songs on the radio that aren't really a dance. It's just one verb: bounce, jump around, jump. You know.
Yep.
It's just very simple. Everyone can do it.
No, I still think that, you know, that's still a magical era of hip hop. maybe it's just my age speaking. I don't care,
No,
but
I don't think we need to squash the idea that anything interesting came out in the 2010s. In some ways, it was a renaissance. It doesn't match the golden era.
Yeah.
But,
Right.
but Kendrick coming along doing genuinely new things, even before he was doing what he's doing these days.
Do you like Kendrick Pascal?
Of course, with Dre's help, I think the Black Hippie Collective, Ab-Soul,
Yeah.
J-Rock, Schoolboy Q, and Kendrick, they are direct descendants
Yes.
of the Indians, whatever
Yes.
you want to say about them. I
Yes.
think Danny
But so
Brown
is Pharrell.
coming along,
Yeah.
you know,
Danny
doing
Brown, yeah.
like, bringing the Busta Rhymes ODB kind of married with Roger Rabbit class clown thing. Run the
Mhm.
Jewels, finding each other and and
Right.
doing what they did. Obviously, I love that because they're my age, and
Mhm.
to be able to find that success in your 40s after you've paid your dues and
Yes.
paid them and paid them and paid them and paid them.
Yes.
Right.
I think that there's something to be said that the past decade had some reasons to smile and some reasons to pay attention, but
Yeah.
you can't have anything in the streaming era that matches what was going on in the music business back when there was a music business in the golden era of hip hop. It'll never be replicated.
So I saw, and maybe this is time we should start wrapping it up. I worked at all these music festivals, and I never cared to watch an artist. And there was one year, and this festival no longer exists, sadly. It was called FYF, or the Fuck Yeah Fest, and it was in Southern California, where the Coliseum is. And I was stuck in an office, and I missed every performer I wanted to see. And I wanted to see Bjork. She was going to be there. I was like trying to make time, miss Bjork because I got stuck in this office. Finally, a very nice young lady grabs me and goes, "You're coming with me. Tribe Called Quest is playing right now. Have you ever seen Tribe Called Quest?" I said, "No, I've never seen them live." She goes, "I got a perfect spot. We can watch it behind this one bar. I know you hate crowds. You won't be bothered." Go, run, watch Tribe play on, I don't even think it was the main stage. And maybe it was the main stage. And this is after Fife died. This is Fife has just passed away earlier this year. Yeah, this was 2017, 2018. I was at this festival. And, on my festival calendar of where I'm going to see Tribe like three more times, allegedly. So I'm watching the show, and they're killing it. And so when the Fife parts come on, there's a video screen, and usually they just play the video of Fife rapping. So Electric Relaxation, they're playing the video, and Consequence and Jerobi are doing background, right? And they actually did like an encore, which is weird for festivals because you don't have that much time. And they broke down and started crying.
Yeah.
And they started doing this Fife Dog chant, and everybody, I had a pretty good, view of this massive crowd of people, not a dry eye, in the 50, 60, 70,000 people, I remember was there, and a smiling, tearful eye. Because we watch what would be the last performance.
Well, imagine what's going to happen next time Mace and Paz are on a stage. And
I don't know if they can do it, man.
I don't think they'll ever do a concert, but I just feel like there will be a moment where there'll be a moment with them and a crowd and the memory. You know what I love most about that last Tribe album? It's a hit and miss album, but it's very interesting and cool and very creative. It's very, just very, following their muse. But besides Fife, who killed it every time, Busta Rhymes is there in a very subdued, native tonguesy kind of supporting role, taking a step back from his roided up, let me show you how fast I can rap, like reminding me of just. And he's just kind of he feels like Fife's bodyguard or buddy or whatever, and he's got his low voice and he's doing his little thing, like on that song Solid Wall of Sound, and him and Fife are doing the patois thing, it's it felt like it was like a return to a kind of sweet side of him that I hadn't seen in forever.
Well, he
That was
becomes
lovely.
Busta Rhymes, this mega
That's right.
star in
That's
the
right.
late 90s by
Yeah.
just those Hype Williams videos.
That's right.
Who hot? That was a song. That was a song that really took him to the next level.
He's
With that,
he takes off so far beyond what we thought the native tongues could do, because again, this is a different time. We all know these groups. You grab anyone in our age range, they know these groups. You maybe didn't own the records, but you know these groups because not all those guys went platinum. Actually, very few of them.
Let's not get it twisted. Though, Busta Rhymes is a legitimately banging MC.
Yeah.
Yes.
Still.
He is also native tongues. I will say that.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah. He's the highlight scenario. He's got to be.
That's
But
true.
you know who?
Yeah.
But you know what? Busta Rhymes is not the most surprising member of the contingent we talked about today to go multi-platinum.
Oh no!
Not by a long shot. You know who is?
Who?
CeeLo Green. That would have been unthinkable to me. That CeeLo Goody is going to be writing pop songs that grandmothers are singing along to at weddings.
Yeah.
No, never going to happen.
Yeah.
And
Good
yet,
singer.
Yeah.
and then I got to see Goody Mob at Stony Hall in New York City last May, and he was back to being CeeLo Goody, and the four of them together. It was like it was a ceremony. It was so amazing to see the four of them. It was a real privilege. I also saw Raekwon and Ghostface at the same venue, and they were both singing like crooning R&B shit. They had a live band, and like doing slow jams, like talking to the crowd like 10 minutes at a time. It was a real loungy kind of middle-aged experience.
I some of the best shows I've ever seen. I played. You probably don't know this, Daniel. I played metal and punk music for years, but some of my best show experiences and things I remember vividly, like the best shows I ever attended. There's a place in San Francisco called the Maritime Hall, which sadly no longer exists. And when we did a live show in New York recently, and I stayed with some friends from high school, and they're huge hip hop fans. Shout out to Nick and Sky. And we're sitting, he's driving me to the venue where we're going to do the live show, and we're talking about some of the best shows we ever went to, and we realized we were both at this one show. It was Black Eyed Peas coming off their first record, and we had known them many moons ago. I don't know them anymore. And they invited us.
Who does?
And they, I don't know those dudes anymore. That's a story for another time. But they were opening for Outkast when Aquemini came out. That was, to this day, one of the best shows I've ever seen in my life. Hip hop show from start to finish. Oh my God. Outkast was performing with a live band. This is what, 98, 99? Blew me away.
Yeah. And
that whole Southern clique, them and Goody Mob, Killer Mike is a part of it as well. What was the name of the crew that was making the Dungeon Family that was making all those beats?
Yeah. And then UGK kind of adjacent to them.
Oh, I liked a lot of that Southern stuff. To me, it just kind of
absolutely.
resonated. Maybe the drawl reminded me of my Southern family, but I definitely dug a lot of like.
And the music was organic. The beats were really organic. The
8-Ball, MJG. Yeah. I don't know if you liked all that Southern stuff too, Pascal.
Some of it I liked. I liked Outkast, Goody Mob. I'm still a big fan of T.I. So some of it, was very. My man, not T.I., but also from Atlanta. Oh my God, come on, light skinned brother. What is his name?
Dallas Austin.
Not Ludacris. Not Ludacris.
Ludacris.
Okay.
Ludacris is another cat. Doesn't get his flowers. Ludacris is a banging MC, man.
He's really talented. Yeah.
He knows
how to write a crowd pleaser. That's what he does. He writes crowd pleasing anthems par excellence without being too stupid about it. But he's clever and funny and yeah.
Can you admit as a composer how hard that is to do? I think people think it's easy.
Oh God. I don't write pop songs. I write musical theater primarily. One credit on my resume that you didn't mention is I'm a 2-time finalist karaoke championship of New York City, but that's something else.
Wow.
But as a composer, I play.
Us.
Yeah, yeah. Hip hop karaoke, which
That's
is spread far and wide, started in the Lower East Side, and I was at the original event. I rapped as RDJ. I wonder if you can tell why. That's the name they gave me for my celebrity lookalike. And McDaniels kicked me out of the first round of the first championship because of Woo-Ha, Cat in the Hat, Dr. Seuss hat, and a big oversized thing, and I was just going nuts. Like I tried to bust around voice, and I forget who the other judges were. Drez was a judge, I think, the following year. But anyway, Ralph McDaniel says in front of the entire Highline Ballroom, RDJ, if you ever run up on me in a dark alley, I will shoot you in self-defense. And then he ranked me very low, and I got booted out. So but anyway, as a composer, it's hard to especially to write a crowd pleaser that moves things forward. Like think of a song like Rosa Parks or Bombs Over Baghdad, just to stay with Outkast. Those things had never been done before. They'd never been done before, and yet it's as if they were like retrofitted from the future to be the banger of that summer whenever they came out. A song with harmonica and hand claps and a breakdown, with everybody moved to the back of the bus, which I think actually pissed at the time. And also, Bombs Over Baghdad has a totally problematic hook. Don't bang unless you plan to hit something. They were talking about how the U.S. was like flying over Baghdad and not hitting anything. Like hell they were.
Mm.
Yeah, but anyway, that aside, we're not gonna cancel. Writing a song that is not pandering to what's already come, because Will is always just aping, like getting jiggy, doing the jiggy thing. Something, boom, shake the room, he's aping LL. But to do a pleasing hit that's moving something forward, and only special artists can do that.
Naughty by Nature.
That's a very good example.
OPP, Hip Hop Hooray.
That's
Hip Hop Hooray for sure.
No, there's another. What was the other one they had?
I liked Uptown Anthem. I don't know if it was that big though.
There's another big song they had.
Isn't that Peter Guns?
Go now.
Uptown Baby.
Sure, I remember that. Large Peter Guns. New York.
Yeah. With the Steely Dan sample, and Steely Dan sued
Black Cow.
Yeah, Black Cow. But you know who used the best Black of all time is MF Doom.
Who
on MF Doom on Gas Draws.
I got to re-listen to that.
I think they took he takes part of the instrumental bridge of Black Cow and just it's beautiful. But of course, who did it first? Bringing it all the way full circle, De La Soul on I. And they said 3 Feet High and Rising. Where does the title of that album come from? A fucking Johnny Cash sample. Who does that? Who does that ever? Never mind 1989.
They were taking so much stuff. Prince Paul, we haven't mentioned his name, which is sad in this show. Prince Paul has to get a lot of props because he is taking stuff that has no business working together. Break of Dawn, which is one of my favorite sampled songs.
Unbelievable.
With that Michael Jackson, I Can't Help It.
Plus Smokey
and the Break
Robinson.
of Dawn and the Smokey Robinson.
Yeah, that's a great one.
You put on, I wish we could play the music without getting the copyright hit, but man, it makes you go run back. I don't know if you're the same type of person. I feel like you are, Daniel, and go find the original songs.
Oh yeah.
And play some of these original songs because when you hear the way they take it or slow it down, like when LL was showing how Hyro slows down and where they take the 93 Till Infinity sample from, you don't even recognize the song that they take it from.
If you ever want to have your mind blown, go look. You know, there's DJs who will do an album's samples, like they'll cross cut on YouTube. So the only built for Cuban Links album, you know the song Ice Water?
Yeah.
That really slow one with Capadonna.
Yeah.
Go look at where that comes from and what RZA did to get that one little moment. I mean, RZA's, I think, as far as sampling goes, transforming things and hiding them.
Yeah.
Like you could listen to the opening of I Can't Help It and be like, I can imagine, but RZA is a collage artist. He's like he takes like found objects and sticks them together and creates beats. So no, I love digging in the crates metaphorically, because there are no crates anymore. But I love I love sample moments. I love finding out where things come from.
Oh man, sure. Well, it took me forever to realize that So Many Tears is Stevie Wonder, That Girl by Tupac.
Wow. My favorite Stevie Wonder sample thing, which I actually spotted, and it's possible. Here's another RZA thing. Shimmy, shimmy, ya.
Is a Stevie Wonder sample?
Listen, that is the hook go. Dun, 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 dun. You go to Knocks Me Off. Da, 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 da. The piano opening. RZA took the first notes and sequenced them. And I figured it out just from the timbre of the piano, and then I checked it and it was correct, and I gave myself a big back pat for that. But that's just another that's one of the only incredible things.
It's one of the only songs I can play on the piano. Pretty good at it. I'm pretty good at it.
I mean, look, we could go down a sample rabbit hole, because that also.
Well, let's do that another time.
Back to De La. Those Digging in the Crates cats, Diamond D, Beat Nuts.
Beat Nuts is Native Tongues too, by the way.
Beat Nuts is definitely Native Tongues. The edgier Native Tongues. But we off the books this year. Oh
yeah, well, Tip shouted them out on Low End Theory. Beat Nuts is in.
That's right. House. Dante Ross, A&R extraordinaire,
the Scrub.
Who? Do you know Dante? I was, because you're East. You're in the East Coast now.
Do not know him, but all I know is that we all know that Dante was a scrub.
He has a lot to do with like the Hyro guys all getting those jive deals, you know.
Yeah.
And again, that's back.
We haven't mentioned Boot Camp Click.
Why haven't we mentioned Boot Camp? Who Tucson
well, because I think
was going to try to get.
Because I think we would have to be going off seeding the conversation from Wu-Tang, because that's where Boot Camp comes from. I mean, in terms of inspiration.
But back to that 92 year, who got the props?
No doubt. No doubt.
That was the jam.
Well, you're right, and that's before Wu-Tang. So what am I talking about?
But
yeah.
Black Moon, and those remixes that they did a few years after that, was like 94, 93. I Got You Open, and what's the other remix, Tucson, that Black Moon does?
Besides I Got You Open, who got the props?
There's another remix.
Bucktown?
But is that them? That's Smith and Wesson, right?
Buck 'em down.
Buck 'em down. Woo! You remember that?
Yes.
How old are you? 4?
You remember Buck 'em down? If you remember Buck 'em down,
it's hypnotic.
If you remember Buck 'em down, you know what that means? Tucson had the maxi single.
Get out of here. I had a tape that a friend made for me. Shout out to Killer Ka.
Dude,
hope you get out one day.
I want to go listen to that right now. Also, like
Great
Souls
song.
and all those dudes used to do remixes that were like totally different songs. and then they throw a song in. So if you bought the maxi single of something, there was always going to be this extra cut. Like I said, man, I miss that moment, that era of music where you would find
Lords of the Underground. Lord,
Oh yeah, man.
I was trying to remember, you know,
Yeah.
whom I first heard them on the Funk, the Biggie song, you know, who sampled them.
Chief
but then,
Rocka.
you know, number one.
Dude, Chief Rock is
Chief Rocka, yeah.
jam.
Chief Rocka is really one of those classic singles that just
What's his
amazing.
name? He's a councilman in New Jersey now.
Are you serious?
Do it all. Yeah, do it all. He's one of our frat brothers.
Are you being serious?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Well, damn, do it all.
Damn, dude.
He lived up to
I
his, he
can't
lived
see-
up to his name. He lived up to his name.
He did.
Because if you okay, I remember there was a baseline battle. It was either what was a Diggable song? I can't think of it now. Cool Like That.
Rebirth
Cool
of
Like
Spring,
That.
Cool Like That.
And Chief Rocka both came out around the same time with just these bass lines that were just like you had to stop in your tracks when you heard them. Like, oh
Right.
my god,
It's true.
KRS had
that Diggable
bass
bass
line
line.
The Funky Child by
That's incredible.
Lords of the Underground was another one.
Mm,
For sure.
Oh, dude.
KRS
I'm-
has a bass line that's uncannily like it's a premiere beat off Return of the Boom Bap. The song Mortal Thought, you know. I never want the Jerry curl to run down my head, you know. One of these upright walking bass lines, you know.
Right. Right.
And Premier
and maybe
did all the beats on that album and the next.
and Premier actually kept making keeps. I shouldn't say like he's gone. He's still around and he's still making good music. Pete Rock actually still makes.
Him and Pete Rock are two of the greatest producers in the hip hop. Pete
Don't
Rock,
follow them cats on social media though.
Yeah.
Pete Rock, RZA.
What's wrong with them?
Premier.
Hey.
What's
You
wrong
want
with them?
They're men of a
denial?
men of a certain age
Some what?
with certain beliefs.
If you follow any of your hip hop heroes on social media, you finna get your feelings hurt.
Why?
It's true.
Whatever. If I follow any of them on social media, I'm about to get my breakfast on the floor.
Their politics are reactionary. I mean,
Talking about, you know,
Oh, I only
we have to
follow
talk about him
toys of my era.
Yeah, we'd have to talk about big rappers.
Mortal Technique. Who was it, Toussaint? Was it the Broadway cat or was it Immortal Technique? Who's the Broadway cat that did Hamilton?
Lin-Manuel Miranda and Immortal Technique talked about stuffing him in garbage can when they went
That's
to
right.
when they went to, you know, whatever that
Whatever school
high
they went
school was,
to.
the performing arts
Yeah.
high school.
That's
He
I
rough.
think it's
him.
all love. I think they had a good laugh about it. I think. If
I
you want to,
don't know.
if you
I
want to
think
get,
Lin-Manuel
we're not going to
is
do it
laughing
now
all
because
over the bank.
I got to go. But if you want to get
Yeah.
me to pop off, because I'm a musical theater composer,
Yes.
so you can sometime you can ask me about my complicated feelings about Hamilton.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
that's a show right there. Daniel,
We got
thank you
two
so
more
much.
shows to bring you back for.
Daniel, thank you
Guys,
so much for hanging out with us and going down
Anytime I
memory
will,
lane.
you know, as Biggie says, Puppy said, shit, we can do this every weekend.
Right?
Daniel, thank you so much, man. Have a good weekend. Going down memory
Nice to meet
lane.
you.
I think Pascal Toussaint, when we remember this stuff, you know, I don't like to get sad because these groups that we talked about can't go on tour the way they did before because they're missing integral members. De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, you know, that
I
hurts
mean,
to think that
where
you
there's
know,
a will, there's a way. Rock bands do it.
it's never
It's
the
not
same.
the same. It's
Never
not
the
the same, and it's never the same. But if you
Van
want
Halen.
to,
Van Halen can't go out.
maybe
You can't.
Van
You can
Halen.
try to go out with his son Wolfgang, who's a hell of a player. Not the same.
Maybe not.
Pantera trying to do it right now. They're getting banned from festivals. 2 founding members are gone. Not the same. It's hard. It's a hard watch in my opinion. Um,
Rage figured something out. I mean, maybe there's something new that can be made.
Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, they came up with
Oh,
Audio
motherfuckers are
Slave.
alive.
Well, they came up with Audio Slave, which now they can't do anymore.
Well, that's Chris Cornell. Chris Cornell is passed away, and Soundgarden, you know, they're not going out. Nirvana didn't go back out.
It's hard to replace.
Yeah, it's
or
Dave and Fife again. After watching Tribe's last show, it's fun, but it's painful. And
see, that's where I am with this. And I had hoped to actually, I should have written it down. I'd hoped to talk to Daniel a bit about it. Just it can't get painful. It can. I mean, and we've all had our own losses in the meantime, and we've dated our lives to these songs. It's difficult to go back down memory lane sometimes, isn't it, Pascal?
It could be quite a torturous turn.
yeah, those groups. If De La does something, there'll probably be a benefit show. I'm sure people will fill in. Trust me, a lot of 90s groups you see, there's not original members in them, not because they're passed away, but because of problems and lawsuits and all this, that, and third. But like seriously, those groups, those native tongues groups, if you got a chance to see them at some point in your life, cherish that memory. Because
For sure.
man, again, there's like 3 shows I will never forget. That last Tribe show, which we didn't know, none of us knew that would be it. I want to say 2 weeks later, we were supposed to see him in San Francisco at Outside Lands, and they had like flaked the day of. Not flaked, but they made a statement. They're like, we can't do it anymore. We're spent. This is where our best friend, our brother, died. We're done. We can't do it. That Outcast, Black Eyed Peas concert where there's probably 300-400 people in this little bitty room crammed together, jumping up and down somewhere the floor was given. And I saw Muse in a 200-seat club when they were still arena big, and that was amazing.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about what we don't get if we don't get native tongues. So just a couple more acts I wanted to add.
Mm-hmm.
When I was talking about that bridge that we crossed with the shiny suits on the other side, Pharrell's on the other side of that.
Yes.
But he really is more of a native tongues kind of person. And he brings it together. He manages to make it pop and become like one of the most successful producers in more recent times. Also, Kanye.
Direct line.
Common. I mean, Common, Mos Def, Black Star,
Yep.
Talib. I would say also you got
Eminem.
the Soulquarians. Soulquarians say
You
we're
gave
going to
me
give
crap
ourselves
about wearing that. I won't even wear that hat anymore because you said I look like a Soulquarian.
Your Soulquarian hat.
I won't wear it. I was gonna wear it. I was like, nope.
Crochet goofy hat.
Jason, why do you look like a Soulquarian?
You really did.
Nah, I won't wear. I will not wear that hat because you showed me the light. You don't get Outcast.
We got Jason's hat. We got. I say we also don't get Odd Future, so we don't get Tyler the Creator either.
De La Soul in that Drink Champs interview says that there's a direct line between them and Odd Future. They felt, and I could see that, and I think Odd Future, in a way, is maybe what would have happened to De La Soul if they came up in a media moment like we have now.
Right. Which means they broke up.
I'm glad they didn't come up in that moment. Think about these rap groups from that era. They don't change lineups too much.
Posses don't last. The big ones.
Wu-Tang's
I don't
lost
know.
members, but you think about these groups, the Native Tongues, even Jungle Brothers. That's the original cats.
True Blue Brothers.
Again, Run DMC loses a member, an integral member. But outside of Loss, there's not a lot of guys jumping ship. Not even too many solo careers. That's another thing about the Native Tongues. Who had a solo outside of Busta Rhymes? Who really had a successful solo career?
I wish Native Tongues had a central project to focus on. I wish they had a logo like Wu-Tang. I wish they had a record label. Who could
That's
they
the
have put
thing.
out?
That's you can't
They
have that.
weren't thinking like that back then.
But you also
And
can't
I
have that
understand.
because they get their deal first. Tribe gets their deal. Tribe signs with Jive. Native or De La signs with Tommy Boy. Right there, they're not in that meeting room about a song.
Right.
That's labels in that meeting room, and about who's going to release what. Which is why when Hyro got signed, all those guys got signed to the same label, and there was I think what were we calling Eric Sermon's crew? What were they called?
Def Squad.
Def Squad. We're all on Def Jam, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
So that makes it easier for them to put out projects. Boot Camp Clip. I think they all go independent again after the rise of gangsterism as a lifestyle rap. I don't even want to call it gangster rap because I think shiny suit, coke rap, and gangsterism as a lifestyle is all like the same stuff. A lot of those dudes from the era before got dropped because of the bigger multinational corporations coming in and buying out these labels and huge mergers. They were like, if you're not selling 1 million copies, you're not performing.
Right.
So a lot of classic groups lost their deals. And whoever was able to navigate the internet early on in the mid to late 90s had some staying power. They were able to continue to tour. So, and put out product independently. Again, maybe because I'm just from Oakland and I know these guys, seen them for years, but Hyro being able to form their own label after they all got dropped, using getting dropped as not a sign that you're irrelevant, but as a way that you're going to change the game. It's massive. It's massive what they were able to accomplish in the internet era. Release 2 records that sell 500,000 copies independently. That's amazing. And you're not getting radio airplay.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have videos in rotation.
Mm-hmm.
So the guys that were able to do that, props to them. And there's just not a lot of them. But now here we are. I'm sorry.
It's tough. It's tough for anybody now. I mean, I heard Method Man at the barbershop and one of those podcasts.
I love that.
Method Man at the barbershop, like I was in the barbershop getting my hair done too. He was like, you see these young rappers and they got private jets and stacks of cash. He was like, we did not have that. We did not have that. And I've seen footage Wu-Tang talking about how you got like 5,000 for the night. You guys split that 9 ways. Who's sleeping in the van? Who wants a hotel for tonight? Like this kind of thing. How he's like, how are they doing it? In the case of Young Thug, is he mixing the game in with the game?
There's some smoke and mirrors.
There's
some guys that are legitimately on record labels.
True.
Never underestimate a label's power to make it seem like you're more independent than you are, because that's like a thing people like with the rise and grind culture. It meshes well. Your faux independence and a culture of telling people that if they just try harder, they will be successful. I think all those things work in cohesion. Like that band that I was telling you about that I really dig. There's some money behind them. Yeah. You don't get on Discovery on these apps like Pandora and Spotify because you're on the service.
It's like a whole industrial complex of these rappers explaining record deals. So yeah, it's also supposed to be very cool that you know your record deal and it's not a 360 and you sit down and you talk about business and money at a radio station.
And you're not even
I'm
telling the
not
whole
here for that.
story. Yeah, it's like it's
No.
bullshit. It's bullshit. It's like you're not
It's
telling the whole story. You'll take listening to De La and Nori talk. I suggest people go watch that Drink Champs episode. It's actually a pretty interesting discussion. And again, it was some of the stuff that I was lucky to be privy to living in that warehouse for so long, because when you're around people that you grew up listening to constantly, I want to know. And I got to sit there and be a sponge and hear things. Like, I think I told this story before the show. Um, this rapper named Filthy Rich. Do you know him, Toussaint?
Sounds familiar. A
He
lot of
did a
rich
video.
rappers though.
He did a video. And he did a video
My
with the guy.
favorite rich is Quan.
What'd you say?
My favorite rich is Quan. Rich
Oh
homie
God.
Quan.
Um, he was doing a video with a guy that got killed not too long ago, Young Dolph. I think Young Dolph got killed, right?
That's right. I remember that.
So they did a video, and it was just a nightmare because he posted it on social media where he was going to be, the address of the studio. Oh my God, there's just niggas everywhere, and so they had all these rented, very, very expensive cars. And the people that drop off those very expensive rented cars are armed, and they're just, it's not where you want to be when Jesus comes. And I remember going to the director of that shoot, and he's a kid. He's this little Asian kid, and he was just like, he goes, I didn't know these people are going to be. And his eyes were as big as Oreo cookies. And the next day, Paris came in, the rapper Paris. Devil made me do it. Remember Paris Pascal?
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking. And the shoot for this video, the budget, I'm saying too much. Watch these dudes got to get mad at me. Which was a big budget when you hear budgets in 2023. Videos are really cheap to make now. It was like 50 grand for this video. And Paris comes in and we're talking about budgets. And Paris goes, my first video was cheap. And it was like a few $100,000. The things that you would hear about how money was getting thrown around when these guys were first getting started, and how they still weren't making any.
Yeah.
Very few of those cats actually walked away with money. And you talk about Wu-Tang being a big crew. How big do people think Digital Underground was? There's a lot of cats playing live instruments in that. So it's for the guys that can keep doing it for the long haul. It's a beautiful thing to watch. And I do like the fact that there's kind of an oldies scene, if you will, for these surviving dudes. But being that I saw the Who twice, the Rolling Stones, I've seen Bob Dylan, I've seen Roger Waters. I'll never see De La Soul, and that sounds insane. That sounds
I
insane.
gotta put it out my mind, man. I'm not processing this too well, I have to say. Just he's a person that wasn't supposed to go. Not yet.
No. None of these
Native
guys.
Tongues only. No, none of them. Gangsta Boo.
I've
How
seen
did that happen?
I've seen the Angels rehearsing. My boyfriend's back and you're gonna be in trouble. They're still alive.
They're still alive. Still
And
doing
De La
shows.
Soul is missing.
Yeah,
Shit ain't right.
it's not. I mean, I'm concerned. I'm dare I say afraid of who's going to be next. Like, it's these people you don't expect. Heavy D was a huge shock. Like, how are these people dying so young?
He made the Hollywood. He was making the Hollywood pivot. Again,
Yep.
you don't make a lot of money. Your moment's over. Where's the first round of these guys? They're still alive. Flash,
Cool.
Grandmaster Flash still alive. Melly Mel?
Cool Herc. Cool Herc needed health insurance though.
I don't want to see an Indiegogo or a GoFundMe so these guys can, get chemotherapy.
Yes, that's real. That's very, very real. And not for nothing. Okay, any of us can go at any time. I was very saddened when Michael Brooks passed away. Is one of the reasons why it was important for me to make sure we had that birthday party for Pascal. I think it's important for people to hear about their impact. I think it's important for other people to get the opportunity to speak about the impact that other people have on them. So,
Inshallah, Pascal gonna be around for a long time there, buddy. Relax.
I believe that, but it's good to hear it, and what a difference it might have made to Michael Brooks if he had a birthday party and people could have said things to him before he passed.
Yeah, it's just
we
what?
Can't
Shout out
take
to
it for
Michael
granted.
Brooks. Leisha just won an Emmy.
I saw that.
Wow, that's nice. Wow,
Leisha won an Emmy. Shout out. So yeah, it's again, I've seen so many classic groups. And again, at the studio, you know who you see all the time, Pascal, at the studio? Lenny Williams.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Lenny Williams.
Yeah, Tower Power.
So
It's I've also seen some people pass away.
Yeah.
And remember these people. If you get a chance to see them, go see them. I know Diggable Planets is on tour right now. The original 3 Diggable Planets is doing a whole U.S. run. If you get an opportunity to see these shows, go see them.
Nice.
Because the golden era of hip hop really speaks to where we are as a nation.
Yeah.
In a very
Don't get me started.
Ooh, we started the show off talking about healthcare and lack thereof. These cats wasn't balling. Ice-T, that's not rap money that buys him that house in the Hollywood Hills. That's Law and Order money. That's longest running show in NBC history money. So
that's fact.
Thank you guys. It was still a fun show despite the somber ending.
Mm-hmm.
I'll see y'all Tuesday when we talk with Professor Touré Reed about his first book,
Not Arms with Opportunity.
What prompted that discussion real quick before we go, Pascal? I forgot.
Black History Month.
Touré being black.
End in February with a banger. That's all that was. Just end in February with a banger.
No big deal.
No big deal. End in February with a banger. All right. Well, thank you guys. And again, if you got something to add, leave them in the comments. I'm sure the comments for this show will probably be really fun. Hoping the comments will be really fun. You know what? I started the people's playlist of 80s hair metal. Maybe we should start a people's playlist on Twitter of golden era hip hop. What do you say, Toussaint?
The forgotten singles.
Deep cuts.
Like, don't do albums, do singles.
Do singles? Okay.
Because
we'll do it on the
This Is Revolution
Twitter. We'll do it on the TIR Twitter. We will start a people's playlist of golden era hip hop classics. I'd really love to see what you guys add. And we are
out.
Out.